Welcome time to newcomers alike to Tyranee's Top 5 Albums of 2012 video. Let's get on to the honorable mentions. First, a couple of things though I want to mention. The honorable mentions I'm about to show you are not all from 2012. They're just albums I've gotten into a lot in 2012. But the top 5 lists are 2012 albums, so you can be sure of that. Second of all, I'm a metalhead, so a lot of these choices in this list are going to be some form of rock or metal, and a lot of it is going to be screamy, like death metal. So if you don't really like that, you might not like my list, but keep watching anyways, because a lot of these songs are awesome, even for death metal. 30-second clips only from the best songs of the albums I choose will be played after I, explain why I chose these things to avoid copyright. I would like to play the whole songs, but, YouTube would probably kill me. Please, and finally, please support the albums and bands if you plan on getting these albums, because they are so worth it. I don't do piracy anymore, but, and I'll admit I did at one point, but I don't do piracy anymore. Because I realize that a lot of these bands that you do this stuff to, they really need the money, and even if you do pirate an album, be sure and buy it afterwards if it's good. If it's not good, then whatever, but be sure and buy it afterwards if it's good. Especially don't pirate from smaller bands, because they need the money more than any money. So without further ado, finally, here are the honorable mentions. I'm going to get into these quick because I don't want the video to be too long, and I want to get into detail about my top 5 a little bit more if I can. So, honorable mention number 1, Epica, The Divine Conspiracy. Great album if you like operatic metal. Didn't make the list because it just didn't have the listenability for me. I love the album myself, but it wore itself out pretty quickly. Another Epica, Design Your Universe. Same thing with that one. It seems to be a trend with Epica for me. Number 3, As Daylight Dies, Killswitch Engage. This album is freaking awesome. Didn't make the list because, once again, I've listened to it too much. It just doesn't have an appeal to me that much anymore, but it's still a great album. I'm kind of disappointed that Killswitch Engage haven't come out with a lot of stuff lately. But, number 4, Psychostick, Sandwich. This album is hilarious. I bought it earlier this year, and it turned me into an immediate Psychostick fan, just because this album is... Yeah, they're geniuses at lyrics, I must tell you. You have to listen and see. Number 5, Scurrilous, Protest the Hero. That's a great album. Didn't make my list. Same reason as all the other ones. Didn't have a listenability factor, but that's a great album. Very deep, a little bit depressing. I love it. Go out and buy it. Number 6, Sonata Arctica, Stones Grow Her Name. I bought this album earlier this year because I was a big Sonata Arctica fan, and I loved it the first couple times I listened to it, but about 1 or 2, it almost made the list, but only about 1 or 2 songs, like Cinder Blocks, and I think it was just about Cinder Blocks, had the listenability factor. It was a great album, but it just didn't make the list because of the listenability factor. Iconoclast, Symphony X. It's, I love Symphony X. It's your typical Symphony X sounding album, but it wasn't very much different from their other albums, and that's why it made the list. Didn't make the list because I didn't really get into it that much. Ronald, Jenkees, Disorganized Fun. I listened to this album for the first time this year. Sounded great on YouTube. Listened to it on my headphones. Not so great. It's not really my genre of music, electronica, I suppose. And plus, they put some crappy rap songs in there, and I was just like, meh. But Ronald Jenkees is great. Go check him out. Word Alive, Deceiver. This one barely missed my list, and I'll explain that later. And finally, Of Mice and Men, The Flood. Also barely missed my list, but man, that is a very good album. Go out and look for that one. And now, without further ado, number 5 of my top 5 albums of 2012. Number 5, Coheed and Cambria, The Afterman. This is a concept album based off of the Armory Wars series, which it seems like most of their albums are based off of. Afterman, Dissension, and Ascension are basically a coffee table book written by Claudio Sanchez and Peter David, according to the wiki. The reason I like this album, the songs are addicting, the instrumentals are great, the deep story, as far as I can tell, is cool. It's a very complicated story as far as I've seen. I haven't really looked into it so much, but from what I can tell, it is Main character is eradicating demons, as said in the Key Entity Extraction songs, and there's 4 of those in this album. I'm sure there'll be more in Descension, which is coming out in February, granted, which is the second half of this album, but the 4th one is apparently a shocking twist, tragedy type of thing, as far as I can tell. So yeah, I don't really care for Coheed and Cambria's vocalists usually, but the instrumentals and the lyrics kind of redeem them in this. I just find them sort of whiny, no offense to Coheed and Cambria fans. Now, as you can see, I've got a point scoring thing going on here, so instrumentals for this album get a 8 out of 10 for me. They're great, not the absolute best I've ever heard, as compared to the other things on this album, but they're great. Vocals get a 7 out of 10. Like I said, I'm not really too big of a fan of the vocalist. Lyrics get a 10 out of 10. They're very deep, very good, very addicting. Listenability, 7.5 out of 10. There are a few songs on this album I could listen to over and over, like Key Entity Extraction, Hollywood, the Afterman, and a couple other ones. But overall, I couldn't listen to this album for a long period of time without getting tired of it, but it's still a good album. Now, the best song on this album, in my opinion, the Afterman. So here's 30 seconds of that. I'll tell you what, that is such a calming song. That's why I like it. It's calming, the lyrics are beautiful, and it's got a great music video, which I can't show you at the risk of YouTube owning me. So, next, number 4, The Word Alive, Life Cycles. This album barely beat out Deceiver to be on the list, just barely. We have our first death metal album here on the list, though, so if you don't like death metal, you probably don't like this, because this is a very screamy album. When they do actually sing, though, it actually sounds very good. It's lyrically good, if not a little bit depressing. And the bonus track is amazing, especially the intro to that, which we'll get into, because that's my favorite song of this album. Now, for the point scoring system, we've got 9 out of 10 for instrumentals. The instrumentals on this album are very unique, and they sound very good. You'll have to listen to the album to see, but I really like it. Vocals, 8 out of 10. They scream a lot. It's mostly screamo, but when they sing, like I said, it sounds pretty good. Lyrics, 7 out of 10, a little bit depressing. Not really the best lyrically wise, sort of sounds woe is me, whatever. Overall appeal, 8 out of 10. I didn't like every song on this album, but I liked most of them, and I could listen to most of them over and over again because they were unique, and they sound very good to me, especially for death metal. So, without further ado, here's 30 seconds of The Smoke Monster, the bonus track on this album that I thought was the best song. Whoa, now that's what you call an intro, man. Fans of death metal should all freaking like that, because that was... Man, that song gets me an adrenaline rush, and it reminds me of Lost, but probably only just because of the name. Anyways, let's move on to number 3, Kamelot, Silverthorn. What do I say about Silverthorn other than freaking wow? Fans of Kamelot will know that the vocalist that's been with Kamelot this whole time, Roy Khan, recently left the band because of throat problems. I was very skeptical if they came out with another album. I really was, because Roy Khan was amazing. But this new guy, Tommy, I can't remember his name, but this new guy they got on here sounds almost exactly like him, but he put his own style in the music, and it still sounds really good. I'm super, super relieved that this album turned out the way it is, because I was worried, man. I was worried I would never be a Kamelot fan again after this. Vocally and lyrically, this album is beautiful. It's by far the best album on this list, vocally and lyrically. The reason it's not higher is because I didn't find every single song appealing like number 1 and 2 on the album. It's very listenable, though. It's basically a story. I got the pre-order album thing that had a whole bunch of crap in it, and there was a little storybook, and basically the whole album is, stories and poems that nobody wanted to hear, essentially. Very dark. It's a very dark lyrical album, but it's very beautiful. I would highly recommend listening to this album because it is fantastic. Instrumentals, 8 out of 10. Fantastic, not the best I've heard. Vocals, the best well, not the best I've heard, but pretty much, man. I mean, 10 out of 10 on vocals, for sure. Lyrics, beautiful. Beautiful. You can't beat Kamelot in lyrics on a lot of these albums. 10 out of 10. Overall appeal, 8 out of 10. Only because, I find a majority of the songs on this album listenable. There's one song, though, called, Song for Jolie. It's a really slow song, and it's pretty beautiful, but I can never get in the mood to listen to it. That's the song on this album that I just can't get into. So without further ado, here's the best song on this album, Sacrimony. Now that's a great song. Now, moving on to number 2. We're finally at our top 2. Both these albums I like. Literally every single song on both these albums. I can listen to them over and over again. So, number 2, Holographic Universe, Scar Symmetry. Okay, let me give you a general idea of what this song sounds like. Take Terminator and every Deus Ex Machina type of thing, where machines take over the world and turn it into an album. And then you get Holographic Universe. That's what it sounds like. I mean, I was a big fan of Scar Symmetry's last album. I believe it was called Iconoclast. I heard they brought in a new vocalist. I haven't heard any of their older ones, but they brought in a new vocalist, and they really sound really like... How do I describe it? Techno death metal. It's sort of like techno death metal, but it sounds very good. It sounds very good. The mixing is really awesome. The screaming is placed very well, and it sounds good because it's just like, oh my god, machines are eating me. And we might be screwed. And, yeah, I mean, you'd have to listen to the album to see what I was actually talking about, because it's really hard to describe, but this album it sounds amazing. It is death metal, like I said, and the instrumentals in this album are freaking crazy. Which brings me to my scoring chart. Instrumentals, 10 out of 10. Some of the best I've heard on any album. They are crazy. They'll give you an adrenaline rush. They'll make you think robots are eating your face. Vocals, 8 out of 10. They sound good when they sing. There's still a lot of screaming, and I can never really give, unless the vocals were outstanding, I could never really give a screaming album over an 8, really, on vocals. Lyrics, 9 out of 10. Lyrics are good. Very well thought out. They fit the theme very well. And overall appeal, listenability, 9 out of 10, only because the #1 album barely beats it out. Barely. I love all the songs on this album, though. My favorite song on this album actually happens to be the very last one, though. Ghost Prototype Part 2, Deus Ex Machina. And that's not even the half of what's great on that album. That's just a portion of it. I didn't even give you a taste of the amazing instrumental and lyrical talent of these guys, man. You gotta go buy the album and look at it. Listen to it, man. It's great. That brings me to recap, number 1 through 5. Number 5, Coheed and Cambria, The Afterman Ascension. Number 4, The Word Alive, Life Cycles. Number 3, Kamelot, Silverthorn. Number 2, Scar Symmetry, Holographic Universe. That brings me to number 1. My number 1 album of 2012 is Bury Tomorrow, The Union of Crowns. This is an album I can't even stop listening to, even now. Every single song in this album is awesome. I mean, this is the genre you would call this would be melodic death metal, which kind of sounds like an oxymoron, but they sing extremely well. The vocalist is amazing. The screamer doesn't sound bad. The instrumentals are out of this world. I mean, oh my god. And I mean, this isn't a concept album or anything, but the lyrics are great too, man. This album is just all around the best thing I've heard this year. I got into Bury Tomorrow recently on their last album, which I also thought was pretty out of this world, but I mean, that was last year. These guys are a relatively unknown band. I see this particular album, the last time I looked, was about 3 months after the album had come out. It only had about 70 reviews on iTunes, so they're fairly unknown, I want to say. Fairly unknown, but probably because they've only come out with 2 albums, but both those albums are amazing. Any fans of death metal, melodic death metal, whatever, anything on this list, you will love this album. Instrumentals, 10 out of 10. Vocals, 9 out of 10. Only because they're screaming. If there wasn't... I don't even know what to say about this. I told you I could never give a screaming song a 10 out of 10 in vocals. Lyrics, 9 out of 10. Overall appeal, big 10 out of 10. Obviously. And if you go get this album, you'll be able to hear what it is that makes it so awesome. Here's... To end this video, we'll end you off with my favorite song from my number 1 album 2012, Royal Blood. Thank you all so much for watching. That was my top 5 albums of 2012. My next top 5 list, top 5 Tyranee moments of 2012. Make sure and put those in the comments and they might get in my video. Rate, comment, subscribe, favorite, and I'll see you on the next epic episode.